I used my last coins to pay a stranger's bus fare, not knowing he was a millionaire. I never imagined it would change both our lives forever. You know that feeling when you're counting coins in your pocket for the third time, hoping somehow they'll multiply? That was me, Grace Madison Parker, standing outside Detroit General Hospital on what felt like the longest day of my life. The automatic doors whooshed behind me, carrying that antiseptic smell that had become way too familiar over the past 6 months. I pressed my back against the cold brick wall and pulled out those coins again. 3 quarters, 2 dimes, and a handful of pennies. 85 cents. That's what stood between me and complete financial ruin. Well, that and the eviction notice crumpled in my purse that I'd been ignoring for 2 days. My fingers were still shaking from signing Emma's discharge papers. 4 years old, and my baby girl had been fighting leukemia like a warrior princess. The doctors said her latest round of chemo was promising. But promising doesn't pay for medication that costs more than most people's rent. It definitely doesn't pay for the experimental treatment she needed if this round didn't work. I closed my eyes and tried to push away the image of Emma's pale face against those sterile white pillows. She'd looked up at me with those big green eyes, so much like mine, people always said, and asked when she could go home and play with her dolls again. I'd promised her soon, but honestly, I had no idea how I was going to make that happen. The walk to the bus stop felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. Every step reminded me of how we'd gotten here. 6 months ago, I thought I had my life somewhat figured out. I was working double shifts at 2 different diners. We had a tiny apartment that Emma loved because she could see the neighbor's cat from her bedroom window, and we were making it work. Sure, money was tight, but we were happy. Then came that morning when Emma couldn't get out of bed, the fever that wouldn't break, the bruises that appeared overnight, the blood tests that turned our world upside down, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. I still remember how the doctor's mouth moved when he said those words. But it felt like I was underwater. Everything became muffled and distant. Emma was sitting right there in that paper gown, swinging her little legs and asking if she could have a popsicle, completely unaware that our lives had just shattered into a million pieces. The bus was late. As usual, I sat on the bench and watched the traffic crawl by, thinking about the choices I'd made to get us this far. Selling my grandmother's jewelry. Gone. My wedding ring from the marriage that barely lasted 2 years. Pawned it last month. The small savings account I'd been building for Emma's college fund. Emptied to pay for her first round of treatments. I'd even swallowed my pride and called my sister in California last week. She'd been sympathetic, sure, but between her husband's job loss and their own kids, she couldn't help. Not that I blamed her. Everyone has their own struggles. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was heading home to an apartment I probably wouldn't have much longer. Mrs. Patterson, our landlord, had been patient. More patient than she needed to be. But patience doesn't pay mortgages. The eviction notice gave me until Friday. Today was Wednesday, when the bus finally wheezed to a stop in front of me. I climbed aboard and dropped my coins into the fare box. The driver, an older black man with kind eyes, nodded at me. "You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." I managed a weak smile. "Just one of those days." He chuckled softly. "I hear you. Sometimes life comes at you all at once, doesn't it? If only he knew." I found a seat near the back and pressed my forehead against the cool window. Detroit rolled by outside. Abandoned buildings mixed with signs of hope. People hustling to make their way just like me. This city taught you to be tough, but sometimes even tough isn't enough. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma's daycare. Well, former daycare. I'd had to pull her out when I couldn't afford it anymore. Now my neighbor, sweet old Mr. Rodriguez, watched her when I had to work or take her to appointments. The text was from him. "Emma's asking for you. She drew you a picture." That almost broke me right there on the bus. This little girl, fighting for her life, was drawing me pictures. Meanwhile, I couldn't even afford to keep a roof over our heads. I thought about my options, which was a pretty short list. I could pick up more shifts, but who would watch Emma? I could apply for more assistance programs, but the waiting lists were months long. Well, that was about it. I'd already exhausted every avenue, asked every favor, explored every possibility. The bus lurched to a stop, and I realized I'd been so lost in my thoughts that I'd almost missed my street. As I stood up to get off, I caught my reflection in the window. 28 years old, But I looked older, tired. When had the lines around my eyes gotten so deep? When had my shoulders started carrying so much weight? But you know what? Looking at that reflection, I also saw something else. I saw a woman who hadn't given up, who got up every morning and fought for her daughter, who would do anything, and I mean anything, to make sure Emma had a chance at life. I stepped off the bus into the cool Detroit evening, and something inside me shifted. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was determination, but I felt this strange sense of possibility, like the universe was getting ready to surprise me. I had no idea how right I was about that. Walking toward our apartment building, I passed the same corner store where I used to buy Emma's favorite candy before everything changed. The same fire hydrant she used to pretend was her pet dragon. The same crack in the sidewalk where she'd learned to ride her tricycle. Our life was here in this neighborhood, in these small moments and memories. Whatever happened next, I was going to fight to keep us together, even if all I had was 85 cents and a heart full of love. That had to be enough to start with. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. I knew that. But tonight, I was going home to my daughter, and that was everything. The next morning came way too early, but that's the thing about having a sick child. Time doesn't stop for your exhaustion. Emma had been up most of the night with a fever, and by the time I got her settled and comfortable, the sun was already creeping through our thin curtains. I had to get to the hospital for her blood work appointment, which meant another bus ride with my rapidly dwindling resources. After buying Emma a small juice box and paying Mr. Rodriguez for watching her the day before, I was down to my last few coins, literally. The morning appointment went better than expected. Emma's white cell count was improving, and Dr. Martinez actually smiled when she looked at the results. "She's responding well to this round," she told me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe properly. But then came the conversation about the next phase of treatment, more expensive medications, possible hospitalization, and the words that hit me like a truck. We need to discuss payment options for the ongoing care. I sat in that sterile office chair, holding Emma's tiny hand while she colored in a princess coloring book, and listened to numbers that might as well have been in a foreign language. 20,000, 50,000. Insurance would cover some, but not nearly enough. Payment plans were available, but they required upfront deposits I simply didn't have. "Mrs. Parker," Dr. Martinez said gently, "I want you to know that we won't stop Emma's treatment because of financial concerns. There are programs, grants, foundations that help families like yours, families like mine, the broke ones, the desperate ones, the ones who'd already sold everything they owned and still couldn't afford to save their child's life." I thanked her, gathered up Emma and her coloring book, and headed back to the bus stop. My daughter chattered happily about the stickers the nurse had given her, completely unaware that her mama was calculating whether we had enough money for groceries this week or the bus fare home. The afternoon bus was more crowded than usual. I found 2 seats together and lifted Emma onto my lap. Even though she was getting too big for that, she leaned against my chest and continued coloring, her small fingers carefully staying within the lines. Such a perfectionist, my little girl. She got that from me. We were about 3 stops from home when the bus pulled over and the doors opened with that familiar hiss. A man got on, tall, wearing what looked like an expensive suit, but something was off about him. His hair was disheveled, his tie crooked, and his hands were shaking as he approached the fare box. "I need to get to downtown," he said to the driver, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "It's an emergency." The driver, a different guy from yesterday, wasn't nearly as kind. "Fare's $2.50, buddy. You got it or not?" The man patted his pockets frantically. Jacket pockets, pants pockets, even checking inside his suit jacket twice. My wallet was stolen, please. I have to get there by 6. It's life or death. Not my problem," the driver said flatly. "No fare, no ride. Step off. Please," the man's voice cracked. "I'm begging you. I can pay you back tomorrow. I can..." "Sir, you need to exit the bus. You're holding up my schedule." I watched this unfold from my seat, and something about the raw desperation in the man's voice hit me right in the chest. His hands weren't just shaking. They were trembling like he was fighting panic. His eyes had that wild look I recognized because I'd seen it in my own mirror too many times lately. Emma looked up from her coloring book. "Mama, why is that man sad?" "I don't know, baby," I whispered, but I did know. I knew exactly what that kind of desperation felt like. The man started walking back toward the exit, and I could hear him muttering under his breath. I have to get there. I have to. He looked like he might collapse right there on the bus steps. That's when something inside me just broke open. Or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe something finally clicked into place. I stood up, Emma still in my arms, and called out, "Wait!" Every head on that bus turned to look at me. The man stopped, his foot on the first step down. The driver's eyes found mine in his rearview mirror. My hand went to my pocket, to those coins that represented everything I had left in the world. Emma's juice money for tomorrow, the quarters I was saving for the laundromat, the pennies I'd been counting and recounting like they might magically multiply. "How much did you say the fare was?" I asked the driver. $2.50. I walked to the front of the bus, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Emma wrapped her arms around my neck, sensing something important was happening. "Here," I said, emptying my pocket into the fare box. The coins clinked and clattered as they fell. I counted along with the sound. 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3. That should cover it. The man turned to stare at me, and I got my first good look at his face. He was probably in his 30s, with dark hair and these intense blue eyes that were currently wide with shock, but it was the gratitude in those eyes that almost undid me. I can't let you do that," he said. "You don't understand. I understand enough," I interrupted softly. "Sometimes we all need a little help getting where we need to go." The driver looked from me to the man, then shrugged. "Fare's paid. Find a seat." As the man passed my seat, he stopped. "Thank you," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "You have no idea what this means." I settled back into my seat with Emma, who immediately resumed her coloring like nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something huge. I'd just spent my last money on a complete stranger. As the bus pulled back into traffic, I caught the man's reflection in the window. He was sitting a few rows ahead, his head in his hands, and I could see his shoulders shaking. Whether from relief or stress, I couldn't tell. Emma tugged on my sleeve. "Mama, was that man like us?" "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Scared and sad, but trying to be brave. Leave it to a 4-year-old to cut right to the heart of things." "Yeah, baby. I think he was exactly like us." She nodded solemnly and went back to her coloring, but I kept watching the man's reflection, wondering what emergency was waiting for him downtown, wondering if my small act of kindness would make any difference in whatever crisis had him so desperate. I had no way of knowing that in 3 days, that same man would be standing at my door, about to change our lives forever. For now, I was just a broke single mom who'd given her last coins to a stranger. And you know what? It felt right. Even with an empty pocket and an uncertain future, it felt like the most right thing I'd done in months. Sometimes being human means choosing compassion over self-preservation. Sometimes it means trusting that kindness finds its way back to you, even when you can't see how. 3 days. That's how long it took for my world to completely flip upside down again. Those 3 days after the bus incident were probably the longest of my life. Without any money for groceries, Emma and I were living on whatever I could find in our nearly empty pantry. Crackers, a can of soup that was probably past its expiration date, and the last box of mac and cheese I'd been saving for emergencies. Well, this definitely qualified as an emergency. Emma didn't complain. Bless her heart. She never did. She'd sit at our tiny kitchen table, carefully eating her small portions, and tell me stories about the adventures her stuffed animals were having. Sometimes I wondered if she understood how dire our situation really was, or if 4-year-olds were just naturally optimistic about everything. Mrs. Patterson had stopped by twice, reminding me about the eviction notice. She wasn't mean about it. Actually, she seemed genuinely sorry. But business was business. "I've given you as much time as I can, Grace," she'd said, standing in our doorway with that uncomfortable look people get when they have to deliver bad news. My mortgage company isn't as understanding as I am. I'd spent those 3 days making phone calls to every assistance program, every charity, every resource I could find online at the library. Most had waiting lists. Others required documentation I didn't have. A few offered small amounts of help, but nothing that would solve our immediate crisis. By Wednesday evening, I was sitting on our secondhand couch, staring at the eviction notice, and trying to figure out where Emma and I could go. My sister in California was still struggling with her own problems. I had a few acquaintances from work, but nobody close enough to ask if we could crash on their couch with a sick child. That's when someone knocked on our door. It was after 7, which was unusual. Most people in our building knew better than to go visiting after dark. It wasn't exactly the safest neighborhood. Emma was curled up next to me, half asleep against my shoulder. When the gentle knocking started, I peered through the peephole and saw a man in a suit. My first thought was that it was someone from the hospital, or maybe a social worker. My stomach dropped. Had I missed a payment somewhere? Was someone here to tell me Emma's treatment was being stopped? I opened the door with the chain still attached. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Parker. Grace Parker." The voice sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. "Who's asking?" "My name is Benjamin Montgomery. I believe we met 3 days ago on the bus." My heart stopped. The man from the bus, here at my apartment. I unlatched the chain and opened the door wider, and sure enough, there he was. Same blue eyes, same dark hair. But this time he looked different, put together. The desperate panic I'd seen on the bus was gone, replaced by something that looked like nervous determination. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," he said, glancing down at Emma, who was now peeking around my legs with curious eyes. "But I had to find you. I owe you more than just a thank you." I was still trying to process why this stranger was standing at my door. "How did you even find me?" He looked embarrassed. "I may have asked the bus driver if he remembered seeing you, and I may have ridden that same route every day since then until I spotted you getting off at this stop yesterday. I hope that doesn't sound too creepy." It should have sounded creepy, but something about the way he said it, the genuine concern in his voice, made it seem more like desperation to do the right thing. "What do you want?" I asked. Not unkindly, but I'd learned to be cautious, in my experience. When things seemed too good to be true, they usually were. "Can I come in? I have something important to discuss with you, and I don't think your neighbors need to hear our conversation." I hesitated. Emma tugged on my shirt. "Mama, is that the sad man from the bus?" Benjamin's face softened when he looked down at her. "Hi there. You have a very smart and very kind mama." That did it. Something about the way he spoke to Emma, gentle and respectful, made me step aside and let him in. Our apartment was small and humble, a far cry from what someone wearing a suit like his was probably used to. But he didn't look around with judgment or pity. He sat on the edge of our couch when I offered, and when Emma climbed back onto my lap, he smiled at her. "First," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I want to repay you for the bus fare." He pulled out an envelope and tried to hand it to me. I didn't take it. "That's not necessary. It was just bus fare. Mrs. Parker, Grace, you don't understand what you did for me that day." He ran a hand through his hair. I was on my way to sign documents that would save the last piece of my family's business. If I hadn't made it there by 6 o'clock, I would have lost everything. Your kindness literally saved my life. I stared at him. "Your family's business. It's a long story involving betrayal and stolen money and frozen accounts," he said with a bitter laugh. "But the short version is that someone I trusted destroyed my life, and I was left with nothing. Not even enough money for bus fare, apparently." Emma was listening to every word, her big eyes moving back and forth between us like she was watching a tennis match. "So you found me to say thank you?" I asked. "I found you because I want to help you the way you helped me." He leaned forward. "Grace, I know we're strangers, but I can see you're going through something difficult. The way you gave up your last money for someone you'd never met. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." My throat felt tight. "What exactly are you offering?" "A job. I've managed to recover one of my properties. A small estate that needs managing. The salary would be enough to cover your expenses. And then some, health insurance included." I felt Emma's small hand touch my cheek. She always did that when she sensed I was getting emotional. "Why would you offer a job to someone you don't even know?" Benjamin was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer. "Because 3 days ago, when I had lost everything and everyone I thought I could trust had betrayed me, a stranger showed me kindness, and because," he glanced at Emma, then back at me, "because I recognized the look in your eyes. You're fighting for something important, aren't you?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded. "There is one catch," he continued, and my heart sank. Of course there was a catch. I need someone to help me rebuild my reputation in the business community, someone to accompany me to social events, meetings with investors. I need to appear stable and trustworthy again. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend, your wife. Actually, just for public appearances. 6 months, maybe less, just until I can get my companies fully operational again. I looked down at Emma, who had fallen asleep in my arms. She looked so small, so fragile. The treatment she needed, the medications, the specialists. It all flashed through my mind. I need to think about this, I whispered. Of course, take all the time you need. He stood up and headed toward the door, then turned back. Grace, your daughter is lucky to have someone who fights so hard for her. After he left, I sat in the dark with Emma sleeping in my arms, staring at the envelope he'd left on our coffee table. Inside was enough money to cover our rent for 3 months, a job with health insurance, a chance to save Emma's life. All I had to do was pretend to be married to a man I didn't know. Sometimes hope arrives in the strangest packages. I said yes the next morning. How could I not? When you're drowning and someone throws you a life preserver, you don't question the color of the rope. Within a week, our entire world had transformed. Benjamin wasn't kidding about the health insurance. Within 48 hours, Emma was being seen by Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the top pediatric oncologists in Michigan. The difference was like night and day. Where before we'd waited hours in crowded clinics, now Emma had her own care team. Where before I'd counted pills and rationed medications, now she had access to treatments I'd only read about online. The estate Benjamin mentioned turned out to be a beautiful property in Bloomfield Hills. Nothing crazy fancy. But to Emma and me, it might as well have been a palace. Our new home was a converted carriage house on the grounds, with 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and windows that actually let in natural light. Emma kept running from room to room that first day, her little feet echoing on the hardwood floors. "Mama, do we really get to live here?" she asked, pressing her nose against the window that overlooked a garden where butterflies danced between the flowers. "For now, baby, for now." But even as I watched her explore her new space with pure joy, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living someone else's life. The job itself was straightforward enough. Managing the property, coordinating maintenance, handling correspondence. Benjamin was rarely there during the day, busy rebuilding his business empire from the ground up. The challenging part was everything else. "We need to establish our story," Benjamin had said during one of our first meetings in his downtown office. How we met, how long we've been together, details that will hold up under scrutiny. We'd agreed on a version close to the truth, that we'd met during a difficult time in both our lives, bonded over shared struggles, and fallen in love. The timeline was adjusted to make it seem like we'd been together for over a year. Emma's father was out of the picture by mutual agreement, which wasn't far from reality anyway. "What about affection?" I'd asked, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. "I mean, married couples are affectionate in public." Benjamin had looked just as uncomfortable as I felt. "We'll figure it out as we go. Nothing inappropriate, just hand-holding, maybe standing close at events. Whatever feels natural. Natural, right? Because pretending to be married to a virtual stranger was totally natural. Our first public appearance was a charity gala for children's hospitals, which Benjamin had chosen specifically because it was meaningful to both of us. I spent the afternoon getting ready, trying on the elegant dress he'd had delivered to the house. It was beautiful, deep blue silk that actually fit me perfectly, but I felt like I was playing dress-up. Emma watched me apply makeup in the bathroom mirror. She was staying with Mr. Rodriguez for the evening, which had taken some convincing. She'd grown attached to Benjamin surprisingly quickly. "Are you nervous, Mama?" "A little bit, sweetheart." "Mr. Benjamin is nice," she said matter-of-factly. "He brought me that puzzle with the unicorns, and he always asks about my day." She was right. Benjamin had been nothing but kind to both of us. He'd child-proofed the parts of the main house Emma might explore, made sure the refrigerator was stocked with her favorite foods, and somehow remembered that she was obsessed with unicorns. When she'd had a difficult day with treatment side effects, he'd sat with her while I called the doctor, reading her stories in a gentle voice until she fell asleep. The gala was held at the Detroit Athletic Club, and I felt completely out of my element. From the moment we walked in, everyone seemed to know everyone else, moving through conversations with the kind of ease that comes from a lifetime of practice. Benjamin stayed close to my side, his hand resting lightly on my lower back as he introduced me to person after person. "This is my wife, Grace," he'd say, and each time the word sent a little jolt through me. Wife? I was someone's wife again, even if it was just pretend. "How lovely to meet you," said a woman whose diamonds probably cost more than I'd made in my entire life. "How did you two meet?" I launched into our rehearsed story, surprised by how easily the words came. Benjamin would add details here and there, and slowly, I began to relax. We actually made a good team, finishing each other's sentences and sharing those little glances that married couples do. The turning point came when a man approached us. Marcus Caldwell. According to his name tag, he was handsome in an aggressive sort of way, with perfectly styled hair and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Benjamin, good to see you back in circulation." His tone was friendly enough, but I caught something underneath it, something that made me instinctively step closer to Benjamin. "Marcus." Benjamin's voice was carefully neutral. "Grace, this is Marcus Caldwell. Marcus, my wife Grace." Marcus took my hand and held it just a fraction too long. "Charming. Tell me, Grace, how are you enjoying married life with our Benjamin here?" There was something in the way he said, "our Benjamin," that rubbed me the wrong way. Like he was testing me, looking for cracks in our story. "And I'm very happy," I said, meaning it more than I expected to. "Benjamin is a wonderful husband and father." "Father?" Marcus's eyebrows raised. "I didn't know you had children, Ben." "Grace's daughter, Emma," Benjamin said smoothly. "She's 4. Wonderful little girl." I watched Marcus file that information away behind his calculating eyes. After he moved on to work the room, Benjamin's hand found mine. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Who was that guy? He seemed dangerous." "Yeah, he is. Marcus was my business partner before everything went to hell. Let's just say our relationship is complicated now." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and careful performances, but something had shifted during that interaction with Marcus. Benjamin and I weren't just playing roles anymore. We were protecting each other when someone asked probing questions. We instinctively moved closer together. When I stumbled over a detail, he smoothly covered for me. Driving home that night, Emma asleep in her car seat in the back. Benjamin and I were quiet for a long time. "Thank you," he finally said. "For tonight, for this whole arrangement. I know it's not easy. Thank you for giving us a chance at a real life," I replied. "Emma's blood work came back yesterday. Her numbers are the best they've been since her diagnosis." "That's wonderful news." I turned to look at his profile in the dim car light. "Benjamin, that man Marcus, be careful around him. Something about him felt wrong." "I will," he promised. "Grace, you did great tonight. You're a natural at this." As we pulled into our driveway, I realized something had changed. This wasn't just a business arrangement anymore. Somewhere between watching Benjamin read bedtime stories to Emma and seeing how he'd protected us at the gala, my heart had started to get involved, and that scared me more than any financial crisis ever could. 2 months into our arrangement, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we'd found our happy ending. Emma was thriving. Her energy was back. Her appetite had returned, and she'd gained enough weight that Dr. Chen was cautiously optimistic about her prognosis. She'd even started calling Benjamin Daddy Ben, which never failed to make my heart do complicated things. But happiness has always made me nervous. When you've spent most of your life waiting for the other shoe to drop, peace feels dangerous, like you're tempting fate just by enjoying it. Our routine had settled into something that felt surprisingly normal. Benjamin would leave for work early, usually before Emma and I were awake, but he'd always leave little notes on the kitchen counter. "Hope Emma's appointment goes well today. There's fresh orange juice in the fridge. B," or "Don't forget you both have dentist appointments at 2. I'll try to be home for dinner. B." Those notes were small things, but they meant the world to me. They meant someone was thinking about us, caring about the details of our daily lives. Emma had started preschool at a private academy in Birmingham, something I never could have afforded before. She'd come home every day bursting with stories about her new friends and the amazing playground, and how her teacher, Miss Katie, said she was the best reader in the class. "Mama, can I show Daddy Ben my drawing when he gets home?" she asked one afternoon, holding up a picture of our family, 3 stick figures standing in front of a house with a rainbow overhead, in her 4-year-old world. We were a real family. The lines between pretend and reality had blurred so completely that even I sometimes forgot we were acting. And that was the problem. Somewhere between watching Benjamin help Emma with puzzles and seeing him fall asleep on the couch with her curled up on his chest after story time, I'd stopped thinking of him as my fake husband and started thinking of him as, well, just Benjamin, the man who remembered that I liked my coffee with just a splash of cream, who always asked about my day and actually listened to the answer, who had somehow made Emma laugh more in 2 months than she had in the entire year before. The realization hit me during a quiet moment one evening. Benjamin was in his home office, and Emma was taking a bath, singing some song she'd learned at school. I was standing in our kitchen. When had I started thinking of it as our kitchen? Making dinner and feeling this overwhelming sense of contentment. This is what I'd always wanted. A partner who shared the load. A father figure for Emma, financial security, a beautiful home. It was everything I'd dreamed about during those long nights when I was struggling alone. But it wasn't real. The thought hit me like a physical blow. None of this was real. Benjamin was paying me to play a role in 4 more months. Our contract would be up, and he'd move on with his life. Emma and I would, go back to our tiny apartment. Start over again. Mama, are you okay? Emma appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her favorite unicorn towel, her hair dripping wet. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking. She studied my face with that uncanny ability kids have to see right through adult pretenses. Are you sad thinking or happy thinking? Complicated thinking, I said, scooping her up for a hug. Come on, let's get you dried off. As I helped her into her pajamas, Emma chattered about her day, but my mind was elsewhere. What was I doing? I was falling for a man who was essentially my employer. Worse, I was letting Emma fall for him too. When this arrangement ended, and it would end, it wouldn't just break my heart, it would devastate her. That night, after Emma was asleep, Benjamin and I sat in the living room going over some details for an upcoming investor dinner, but I found myself watching him instead of listening. The way he pushed his glasses up when he was concentrating, how he always made sure my water glass was full, the gentle way he'd tucked Emma in earlier, promising to read her an extra story tomorrow night. Grace, did you hear what I said about the seating arrangements? Sorry, I was distracted. He set down his papers and really looked at me. Everything okay? You seem distant tonight. Just tired, I lied. But Benjamin had gotten good at reading me over the past 2 months. No, it's something else. Talk to me. The concern in his voice almost undid me. See, this was the problem. He was too perfect, too kind, too easy to love, and love was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not when it was built on a foundation of pretense. I'm fine, really. Just thinking about Emma's next round of treatment. You know how it is. He nodded, accepting my explanation, but I caught him studying me several more times throughout the evening when he said goodnight and headed to his room, because yes, we maintained separate bedrooms, even though Emma sometimes asked why Mama and Daddy Ben didn't sleep in the same room like other mommies and daddies. I felt the weight of all my unspoken feelings. The investor dinner was scheduled for the following week at some fancy restaurant in downtown Detroit. Another performance. Another evening of pretending to be the perfect wife and stepmother. I was getting good at it. Too good, maybe. Will there be many people there? I asked Benjamin the next morning over breakfast. About 20, potential investors, some current business partners, a few board members from companies I'm hoping to work with. He paused, buttering Emma's toast. Marcus will probably be there. Something cold settled in my stomach. I hadn't seen Marcus since that first gala, but I hadn't forgotten the calculating way he'd looked at me, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Does that bother you? Benjamin asked, noting my expression. Should it? I hope not, but Marcus has a way of digging into things. Just stick to our story, and everything will be fine. Our story, right? Sometimes I forgot we had a story to maintain because the life we were living felt so real. That afternoon, while Emma napped, I found myself standing in front of the mirror in my bedroom, trying on the dress Benjamin had bought for the dinner. It was beautiful. Burgundy silk that made my skin glow and fit like it had been made for me, which it probably had been. I looked like someone else in that dress. Someone sophisticated. Someone who belonged in Benjamin's world. But underneath the expensive fabric, I was still just Grace Parker from Detroit, A single mom who'd been lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. The question that had been haunting me for weeks surfaced again. What happened when our luck ran out? Emma stirred in her afternoon nap, calling out for Daddy Ben in her sleep. And my heart cracked a little more. She loved him. Completely. Innocently. With the pure faith of a child who'd never been disappointed by the adults in her life. Well, except for her biological father, who'd abandoned us both. But she was too young to really remember that pain. I couldn't let her go through that again, which meant I had to guard my own heart more carefully. I had to remember that this was temporary, that Benjamin's kindness came with an expiration date, and that falling in love with him would only lead to heartbreak for all of us. But as I heard his car pull into the driveway, and watched Emma's face light up when she heard his voice calling out that he was home, I realized it might already be too late. Some cracks in paradise are visible from the beginning. Others only show up when the pressure becomes too much to bear. The investor dinner was being held at the Renaissance Center, one of those upscale restaurants with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Detroit River. I'd driven past this building countless times in my old life, never imagining I'd one day be dining inside it, wearing a dress that cost more than I used to make in a month. Benjamin and I arrived fashionably late, which he'd explained was important for making the right impression. We want to seem confident, not desperate, he'd said in the car, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept adjusting his tie. This dinner mattered. A lot. The restaurant was everything I'd expected. Soft lighting, crystal glasses, servers who moved like dancers between tables covered in crisp white linens. The kind of place where people spoke in hushed tones about million-dollar deals over wine that cost more than my old monthly rent. "Remember," Benjamin murmured as we approached our table, "you're brilliant. You're poised, and you absolutely belong here." I wasn't sure I believed him, but I appreciated the pep talk. The first hour went smoothly. I found myself seated between a woman who ran a tech startup and a gentleman who owned several manufacturing plants in the Midwest. The conversation flowed easily. They asked about my background, and I delivered our practice story about how Benjamin and I had met during challenging times in our respective lives. "It's wonderful when two people can lift each other up like that," the tech executive said warmly. "Your husband speaks about you and your daughter with such obvious love." I glanced across the table at Benjamin, who was deep in conversation with two potential investors. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up and smiled, one of those genuine smiles that always made my stomach flutter. For a moment, I almost forgot we were performing. "Grace has been incredible," Benjamin said, somehow having tuned into our conversation despite the multiple discussions happening around the table. "She's made me a better man and a better father." The way he said it, with such conviction, made me wonder if the lines between our act and reality had blurred for him too. That's when I saw him. Marcus Caldwell was walking toward our table, but something was different about him tonight. There was a predatory confidence in his stride, like a hunter who'd finally cornered his prey. He was alone, which struck me as odd. Most people at these events came with dates or spouses. "Sorry I'm late," he said to the table in general, but his eyes were fixed on me. Traffic was brutal. He took the empty seat directly across from me, and I felt my appetite disappear. There was something in his expression, a knowing look that made my skin crawl. "Marcus," Benjamin said coolly, "I wasn't sure you'd make it. Wouldn't miss it for the world," Marcus replied, still looking at me. "Besides, I was eager to get better acquainted with your lovely wife." The conversation around the table continued, but I found myself struggling to focus. Every time I looked up, Marcus was watching me with those calculating eyes. When I laughed at someone's joke, he studied my reaction. When I spoke, he tilted his head like he was analyzing every word. About halfway through the main course, he leaned forward. "Grace, you look so familiar. Have we met before tonight?" My blood turned to ice water. "I don't think so." "Are you sure? There's something about you. Maybe it's your eyes." Such an unusual shade of green. Benjamin's hand found mine under the table, a subtle show of support. "Marcus, I believe you met Grace at the hospital charity gala a few months ago." "Right, of course." Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes, though I could swear I've seen you somewhere else. Maybe around town. Do you frequent any particular establishments in Detroit? The way he said establishments made my skin crawl, like he was implying something unsavory about my past. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, diners, maybe. I seem to remember seeing someone who looked just like you working at that little place on 8 Mile. What was it called? Mel's Diner." My heart stopped. Mel's Diner was where I'd worked before Emma got sick, before my world fell apart, before I met Benjamin. "I think you're mistaken," I managed to say. "Maybe," Marcus said, taking a slow sip of his wine. "Memory can be such a tricky thing, can't it?" The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I smiled and nodded at the right moments, but my mind was racing. How did Marcus know about Mel's Diner? Had he been investigating me? And if so, why? After dessert, as people began to mingle and move around the restaurant, Marcus appeared at my elbow while Benjamin was across the room talking to the manufacturing executive. "Walk with me," he said quietly. It wasn't a request. Against my better judgment, I followed him to a quieter corner near the windows. The city lights sparkled below us, but all I could focus on was the predatory smile on Marcus's face. "I know who you are, Grace Madison Parker." My maiden name. He knew my maiden name. "I know about your ex-husband who abandoned you. I know about Emma's illness. I know about your financial struggles, your eviction notice, your desperation." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And I know that 5 years ago, you worked as a waitress at the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas. Las Vegas. Why did that ring a bell? I'd worked there briefly during the worst period of my life after my parents died. It was a dark time I rarely thought about anymore. "What do you want?" I whispered. "What I want," Marcus said, his smile turning cruel, "is for you to understand exactly who you're playing house with. And more importantly, I want you to understand that your little fairy tale is built on lies that go much deeper than you realize." "What are you talking about? Tell me, Grace. Do you remember a particular night 5 years ago? A night when you were working the late shift at the hotel bar. A night when a very drunk, very heartbroken businessman was drowning his sorrows because his fiancée had just left him for his best friend. The blood drained from my face. A memory surfaced. Hazy, fragmented, like trying to remember a dream. A man at the bar, devastatingly sad, buying drinks for himself and the waitstaff. A night when I'd been drowning my own sorrows, having just lost my parents in a car accident. I see you're starting to remember," Marcus continued. "Benjamin Montgomery, room 2247. You helped him to his room when he could barely stand. And you, well, let's just say you provided comfort during a very dark time in both your lives." My legs felt weak. The room seemed to tilt around me. That night in Vegas was a blur of grief and alcohol and poor decisions. I'd quit that job the next week, moved back to Detroit, tried to start over. But if what Marcus was suggesting was true, "Emma," I whispered. "Isn't it interesting," Marcus said, "how the universe works? How fate brings people together? Or maybe it's not fate at all. Maybe it's just a very patient man who's been planning this reunion for a very long time." Benjamin appeared at my side suddenly, his face dark with concern. "Is everything all right here?" "Just getting to know your charming wife better," Marcus said smoothly. "We were just discussing some fascinating coincidences about her past." "Grace," Benjamin's voice was gentle, but I could see the worry in his eyes. I couldn't speak. My mind was reeling, trying to process what Marcus had just implied. If that night in Vegas had resulted in, if Emma was, "I think Grace isn't feeling well," Marcus said with fake concern. "She's gone quite pale. Perhaps you should take her home." The ride home was silent except for the sound of my racing heartbeat. Benjamin kept glancing at me, clearly wanting to ask what Marcus had said, but I couldn't form words. My entire world had just shifted on its axis, and I was struggling to understand which way was up. As we pulled into our driveway, I finally found my voice. "Benjamin, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, anything. 5 years ago, were you ever in Las Vegas? Specifically, did you ever stay at the Bellagio Hotel?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Benjamin's silence stretched between us like a chasm. We sat in his car in our driveway, the engine ticking as it cooled, both of us staring straight ahead at the house where Emma was sleeping peacefully, unaware that her entire world might be about to change again. "Yes," he finally whispered. I was there. My hands started shaking. Room 2247. Another pause. How could you possibly know that? I turned to face him, studying his profile in the dim light from the dashboard. Because I was there too. I was working at the hotel bar that night. You were drunk, heartbroken, talking about someone named Miranda who had left you. Benjamin's head dropped into his hands. Oh God, Grace, That night is mostly a blur. I'd just found out that my fiancé had been having an affair with Marcus. Yes, the same Marcus from tonight. She'd moved out that morning, taken half my personal bank account, and I flew to Vegas to, I don't know, escape reality, I guess. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. You bought drinks for all the staff. You said you understood what it felt like to lose everything, because I'd mentioned that my parents had just died in an accident. I remember fragments, he said softly. I remember thinking you had the saddest, most beautiful eyes I'd ever seen. I remember you helping me to my room because I could barely walk straight. And I remember, he looked at me then, his eyes wide with dawning realization. Grace, are you saying that Emma? I don't know, I whispered. But even as I said it, I was thinking about Emma's eyes. The same startling blue as Benjamin's. Her stubborn streak when she was determined to figure something out. The way she'd taken to him so naturally, like she recognized something familiar. We need a DNA test, Benjamin said quietly. Marcus already suggested that at the restaurant, he said he wanted to prove Emma was his daughter. But now, I felt sick. Now I think he knows the truth and he's been playing some kind of sick game with all of us. We walked into the house in silence. Mrs. Rodriguez, our babysitter, said Emma had been an angel all evening, falling asleep right on schedule. After she left, Benjamin and I found ourselves standing in the living room, looking at each other like strangers. I need to understand something, I said. When you found me on that bus, when you offered me this job, did you know? Did you recognize me? No, he said immediately. I swear to you, Grace, I had no idea. That night in Vegas is honestly a blur of alcohol and grief. I barely remembered anything beyond the basic facts. That I'd been at the Bellagio, that I'd been drinking heavily, that I'd made some poor decisions. If I'd had any idea that you were the woman from that night, or that Emma might be. But Marcus knew, I said, the full horror of the situation hitting me. He's known all along. That's why he approached me tonight, why he's been watching us. He somehow figured out the connection between that night and Emma. Benjamin sank onto the couch, running his hands through his hair. This explains so much about his behavior lately. The way he's been pushing to meet Emma, asking questions about our relationship timeline. He's been testing us, waiting for the right moment to reveal what he knows. I thought about Marcus's cruel smile at the restaurant, the way he'd savored dropping those hints about Las Vegas. But why? What does he gain from this? Control, Benjamin said grimly. Marcus has been trying to destroy me ever since Miranda left me for him, when that relationship imploded. And it did, spectacularly. He blamed me somehow, said I'd poisoned her against him. He's been looking for ways to hurt me ever since. So he investigated my past and discovered the connection to that night in Vegas. And then he waited, probably figured he'd use the information eventually. But when he saw us together at that first gala, actually looking happy, Benjamin's jaw tightened. He realized he could do maximum damage by letting us fall for each other first. The cruelty of it took my breath away. He wanted us to care about each other before he pulled the rug out from under us. We arranged for the DNA test the next morning. Dr. Chen was discreet and professional, explaining that we'd have preliminary results within 48 hours. Emma, bless her heart, thought it was just another routine medical test and chattered happily about her upcoming birthday party while the technician collected samples. Those 48 hours were the longest of my life. Benjamin and I were polite to each other, but there was this awkward tension that hadn't been there before. We were both processing the possibility that everything we thought we knew about our situation was wrong. If Emma was Benjamin's biological daughter, what did that mean for us? For our arrangement? For the feelings that had been growing between us? I caught myself watching Emma more carefully, looking for resemblances I might have missed. The way she wrinkled her nose when she was thinking hard, just like Benjamin did, her habit of organizing her toys in perfect rows. Benjamin's office was obsessively neat, little things that could be coincidences, or could be genetics. "Mama, why are you looking at me funny?" Emma asked on the second day while we were having lunch. "I'm not looking at you funny, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about how much I love you. I love you too, and I love Daddy Ben." "Are we going to be a real family forever?" The innocent question hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean by a real family, baby?" "Like my friend Sarah at school. Her mommy and daddy live together and love each other and have the same last name. When will I have the same last name as you and Daddy Ben?" I didn't know how to answer that. How could I explain that our family might be built on a lie? Or that it might be more real than any of us had imagined? The call came on Thursday afternoon. Dr. Chen's voice was carefully neutral when she asked us to come in to discuss the results. Benjamin picked me up from the house, and we drove to the hospital in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. "Whatever the results are," Benjamin said as we parked, "we'll figure this out together." But I wasn't sure there was a together to figure anything out. If Emma was his biological daughter, the whole foundation of our arrangement crumbled. He wouldn't need a fake wife anymore. He'd have real family obligations. And if she wasn't his daughter, well, then Marcus had been playing an even more twisted game than we'd realized. Dr. Chen's office felt smaller than usual. She had us sit down and opened a folder on her desk with the careful movements of someone delivering life-changing news. "The results are conclusive," she said gently. "Benjamin, you are Emma's biological father. The probability is 99.97%. The room spun around me, even though we'd suspected it. Hearing it confirmed felt like being hit by a truck. Emma was Benjamin's daughter, my 4-year-old girl, who I'd raised alone, struggled to save, sacrificed everything for. She'd had a father all along. "How is this possible?" I whispered. "The timing. Based on Emma's birth date and gestational age, conception would have occurred approximately 5 years ago, in late March or early April," Dr. Chen explained. "Does that time frame match your recollection of when you might have?" "March 28th, Benjamin said quietly. "That was the night I was in Vegas. The night Miranda left me." I felt tears streaming down my face. "March 28th, the night I'd gotten the call about my parents' accident. The night I'd worked a double shift at the hotel bar, drowning my grief in the chaos of serving other people's pain. The night a heartbroken stranger had recognized a kindred spirit, and we'd comforted each other in the worst possible way." "So Marcus knew," I said through my tears. "He knew Emma was your daughter when he orchestrated our meeting on the bus. This was all planned." Benjamin reached for my hand. "Grace, look at me. None of this changes how I feel about you or Emma, whether I'm her biological father or not, whether our meeting was coincidence or manipulation. What matters is what we choose to do now." But I was already pulling my hand away, standing up from the chair. "This changes everything, Benjamin. Don't you see? Our whole relationship is built on a lie, and now Marcus has exactly what he wanted, ammunition to destroy us both." As I walked out of that office, I could hear Emma's voice in my head from lunch. "When will I have the same last name as you and Daddy Ben?" Now I knew the answer. Probably never, because real life was messier and more complicated than fairy tales, and sometimes the truth hurt more than any lie ever could. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove around Detroit for hours, trying to process everything that had just exploded in my face. Emma was with Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd agreed to keep her overnight when I'd called from the hospital parking lot, my voice shaking as I made up some excuse about needing time to handle a family emergency. Family emergency. That was one way to put it. When I finally did return to the house the next morning, Benjamin was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and eyes that looked like he hadn't slept any more than I had. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "I know." I sat down across from him, wrapping my hands around the warm mug, and for a moment we just looked at each other. This man who I'd thought was a stranger, who'd turned out to be the father of my child, who'd somehow become the person I cared about most in the world outside of Emma. "I called in sick to work," he said. "Figured we needed to sort this out before Emma comes home this afternoon." "Where do we even start?" "With the truth," Benjamin said. "All of it, Grace. I need you to know that when I offered you this arrangement, when I started having feelings for you, none of it was because I somehow subconsciously knew about Emma. I fell for you, both of you, completely independently of any biological connection. I wanted to believe him, but doubt was eating at me. How can we ever be sure? How can we know what's real and what's just? biological programming or fate or Marcus's manipulation. Because of this, he said, pulling out his phone. I got a call this morning, from Marcus. My blood went cold. What did he want? To gloat, mostly, and to fill in some gaps about his grand plan. Benjamin's face was grim. Grace, it's worse than we thought. Marcus didn't just figure out the connection between us randomly. He's been tracking my life for years, looking for ways to hurt me. When he learned about that night in Vegas, he hired a private investigator to find you. He what? Marcus knew about Emma from the beginning. He knew she was my biological daughter before we ever met on that bus. The whole thing. Me being thrown off the bus at exactly the moment you'd be there. It was all orchestrated. I felt sick. So our meeting was planned by him. He even paid the bus driver to create that scene. But Grace, here's what he didn't count on. Benjamin leaned forward, his eyes intense. He thought I'd find out about Emma and either reject you both out of anger about being deceived or take Emma away from you legally. He was betting that the truth would destroy us. Maybe it will, or maybe it'll make us stronger. Benjamin reached across the table and took my hand. Grace, I know this is overwhelming. I know it changes everything and nothing at the same time. But I need you to know that the man who fell in love with you and Emma, that's who I really am. Not because of DNA or manipulation or fate, but because you two are the best thing that ever happened to me. Before I could respond, we heard the front door open and Emma's excited voice calling out, Mama, Daddy Ben, I'm home. She came running into the kitchen, still wearing her pajamas from her sleepover, her hair a mess of curls, and threw herself into my arms. I missed you, Mrs. Rodriguez let me make pancakes for breakfast, and I only spilled a little bit. Did you now? I said, holding her tight and trying not to cry. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. She wiggled out of my embrace and climbed onto Benjamin's lap. Daddy Ben, will you read me that story about the dragon princess today, Mrs.? Rodriguez tried, but she doesn't do the voices right. Of course I will, Benjamin said, his voice thick with emotion. And that's when it hit me. This little girl sitting on the lap of her biological father had no idea that anything had changed. To her, we were still the family we'd been yesterday. Benjamin was still the man who read her bedtime stories and remembered that she liked her sandwiches cut into triangles. I was still her mama, who sang off-key lullabies and let her wear her princess dress to the grocery store. The DNA test hadn't changed who we were to each other. It had just confirmed what I think. Deep down, we'd all felt from the beginning. Emma, I said carefully, how would you feel if I told you that Daddy Ben wasn't just pretending to be your daddy anymore? What if he was your real daddy? She looked at me with those serious green eyes. He's already my real daddy. Mama, real daddies are the ones who love you and take care of you and read you stories. That man who went away before I was born, he was just a man. Daddy Ben is my daddy. Out of the mouths of babes, Benjamin's eyes were shining with unshed tears. Emma, would it be okay with you if Mama and I stopped pretending to be married and got married for real? You mean like a real wedding with a white dress and cake? Her eyes lit up. Can I be the flower girl? If Mama says yes, Benjamin said, looking at me. I looked at this man who'd somehow become my everything, holding this little girl who was the center of my universe, and realized that Marcus had miscalculated completely. He thought the truth would tear us apart. Instead, it had revealed what we'd been dancing around for months. We weren't playing house anymore. We weren't pretending to be a family. We were one. But then Emma said something that made my blood freeze. Mama, will the mean man from yesterday be at our wedding? What mean man, sweetheart? The one who came to Mrs. Rodriguez's house looking for you? He said he was an old friend, but his eyes were scary. Mrs. Rodriguez told him you weren't there, but he said he'd find you soon. Benjamin and I exchanged a look of pure terror. Emma, Benjamin said very gently, can you tell us exactly what this man looked like? He had dark hair and a fancy suit, and he smiled but not with his eyes, like when the witch in my storybook pretends to be nice. Emma shivered. Mrs. Rodriguez didn't like him either. She shut the door real fast and locked it. Marcus had gone looking for me at Mrs. Rodriguez's house. He knew about our babysitting arrangement, which meant he'd been watching us even more closely than we'd realized. Did he say anything else, baby? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He said to tell you that Robert wants to see his daughter. The world stopped spinning. Robert? My ex-husband's name was Robert Caldwell. I looked at Benjamin, saw the same horrible realization dawning on his face. Marcus wasn't just Marcus. He was Robert, my ex-husband who'd abandoned Emma and me 5 years ago, who'd changed his identity, who'd been playing the longest, cruelest game imaginable. Grace. Benjamin's voice seemed to come from very far away. Please tell me you're thinking what I'm thinking isn't possible. But it was possible, in fact. It was the only explanation that made sense. Marcus Caldwell was Robert Caldwell, my ex-husband, the man who'd left us when Emma was barely walking, who'd disappeared so completely I'd assumed he was dead or in jail somewhere. And now he was back, and he'd been manipulating all of us from the very beginning. Emma, I said, my voice barely a whisper. That man who came to Mrs. Rodriguez's house, we need to make sure he never gets near you again, okay? Okay, Mama. But why was he looking for you? Because he's your father. I thought but didn't say. Because he abandoned us once and now he wants to destroy the happiness we finally found. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, no matter how deep you think you've put it. The call came at 3:17 a.m., 3 days after we'd figured out Marcus was Robert. I know the exact time because I'd been lying awake, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep knowing my ex-husband was out there somewhere, planning God knows what. Benjamin's phone buzzed first, then mine. 2 different numbers, but the same message. Meet me at Montgomery Industries rooftop. Come alone, bring Grace. If you involve police, you'll never see Emma again. My heart stopped. Emma, I whispered, throwing off the covers and running to her room. Her bed was empty. The window was open, screen carefully removed. On her pillow was a note in Robert's handwriting. Daddy wants to see his little girl. Don't worry. She's safe for now. I've never experienced terror like that moment. The kind of fear that makes your legs give out, makes the world tilt sideways, makes you forget how to breathe. Benjamin found me collapsed on Emma's bedroom floor, clutching that note, making sounds that didn't resemble anything human. Grace, breathe. We're going to get her back. His voice was steady, but I could see the panic in his eyes. He won't hurt her. She's leverage. He needs her safe to control us. You don't know him like I do, I sobbed. Robert is capable of anything when he feels cornered. And we have cornered him, haven't we? We figured out his game. We drove to downtown Detroit in Benjamin's car, the city looking eerily quiet at this ungodly hour. The Montgomery Industries building rose 43 floors into the sky, and I couldn't stop thinking about Emma somewhere up there, with a man who'd proven he was capable of abandoning his own child once already. Why the rooftop? I asked as we pulled into the parking garage. Drama, Benjamin said grimly. Robert always did love a grand gesture. Plus, it's isolated. No witnesses, no security cameras, nowhere for us to run. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Benjamin kept trying to reassure me, telling me we'd get through this. But all I could think about was Emma's terrified face. She'd been through so much already with the cancer, the treatments, the uncertainty. Now this. The rooftop access door was propped open. Detroit spread out below us in the pre-dawn darkness, city lights twinkling like fallen stars. But I barely noticed the view because there, near the edge of the building, stood Robert holding Emma's hand. My little girl looked so small next to him, wearing her favorite unicorn pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. When she saw us, she tried to run toward me, but Robert tightened his grip. Mama, she cried out. I want to go home. Let her go. Robert, I called out, trying to keep my voice calm for Emma's sake. Whatever this is about, it's between us. She doesn't need to be part of it. Oh, but she's the most important part, Robert said with that cruel smile I remembered so well. Emma is the key to everything, isn't she? The daughter I never wanted, who turned out to be fathered by the man I've spent 5 years trying to destroy. Benjamin stepped forward. Marcus, or Robert, or whatever you're calling yourself these days. Let's talk about this rationally. What do you want? What I want? Robert laughed, and the sound echoed off the surrounding buildings. I want justice, Benjamin. I want you to lose everything, the way I lost everything because of you, because of me. You're the one who embezzled money from our company. You're the one who betrayed our partnership. I'm the one who took what I deserved." Robert's voice rose, and Emma whimpered. "You had everything handed to you. Family money, connections, privilege. I had to claw my way up from nothing, and when I finally got close to having what you had, you destroyed it all." I was edging closer while they argued, hoping to get within reach of Emma. The wind up here was stronger than I'd expected, whipping my hair around my face and making Emma's pajamas flutter. "Robert," I said softly, "remember when Emma was a baby? Remember how she used to fall asleep on your chest while you watched TV? You loved her once. I know you did." For just a moment, his expression softened. She was beautiful. Perfect. But then the cancer diagnosis came. And the bills, and the stress. I couldn't handle watching her suffer. So you left us to suffer alone. I left to make money, to find a way to pay for her treatment. But by the time I'd established myself as Marcus Caldwell, you'd moved on. You'd given up on me. I gave up on you because you abandoned us without a word. I was close enough now to see Emma's tear-streaked face. You could have called, could have explained, could have asked for help. Instead, you just disappeared. "And look how well that worked out," he said bitterly. "You found yourself a rich boyfriend to solve all your problems. My daughter calling another man daddy. I'm her real daddy," Benjamin said firmly. "The DNA test proved it. DNA doesn't make you a father," Robert snapped. "Being there does. Fighting for them does. Sacrificing for them does." "Then where were you?" I demanded. "Where were you during the sleepless nights when she was throwing up from chemo? Where were you when I was selling everything I owned to pay for her medications? Where were you when she asked why her daddy didn't love her enough to stay?" Emma had been listening to this whole exchange with those intelligent 4-year-old eyes, and suddenly she spoke up in her small, clear voice. "You're not my daddy. Daddy Ben is my daddy. You're just the man who made Mama cry." Robert's face twisted with rage and pain. "I am your biological father, Emma. That has to count for something. Daddy Ben says biology doesn't make a family," Emma said with the matter-of-fact wisdom of a child. "Love makes a family. And you don't love me. You just want to hurt Mama." I do love you," Robert said, but his voice was uncertain. "Then let me go to my real family." That's when everything happened at once. A gust of wind caught Robert off guard, and his grip on Emma loosened for just a second. My daughter, brave beyond her years, broke free and ran toward me. Robert lunged after her, lost his footing on the wet rooftop surface, and suddenly he was sliding toward the edge. Benjamin moved faster than I'd ever seen anyone move, grabbing Robert's arm just as he went over the side. For a terrifying moment, Robert was hanging there, 43 floors above the street, with only Benjamin's grip keeping him alive. "Help me," Robert gasped, all his earlier bravado gone. "Please, Benjamin. I know I don't deserve it, but please." Benjamin was straining with the effort of holding Robert's weight. "Grace, call 911 now." I was already dialing. Emma clutched safely in my arms when I heard Robert say something that made me freeze. "Grace, tell Emma. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I was scared, not cruel. Tell her that loving someone sometimes means knowing when to let them go. And then, whether from the wind or exhaustion or something else entirely, Robert's grip slipped from Benjamin's hand. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Emma buried her face in my shoulder, and I held her tight while Benjamin called for emergency services. When I looked down at the street below, I could see the flashing lights already approaching. "Is the bad man gone now, Mama?" Emma whispered. "Yes, sweetheart. He's gone." "Good," she said simply. "Can we go home now? I want to sleep in my own bed with Mr. Whiskers." As we waited for the police and paramedics to arrive, I realized that Robert had been right about one thing. Sometimes loving someone means knowing when to let them go. He'd let go of Emma and me 5 years ago, and in his final moments, he'd let go again. This time, though, we were free to build something real in the space he'd left behind. 1 year later, I stood in our backyard in Bloomfield Hills, watching Emma blow out 6 candles on a unicorn-themed birthday cake. She was wearing a princess dress that sparkled in the afternoon sunlight, her hair in elaborate braids courtesy of her new best friend from school, and her face glowing with the kind of happiness that comes from being completely, unconditionally loved. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Benjamin called out, his arm wrapped around my waist as we watched our daughter, take the deepest breath her little lungs could manage. She squeezed her eyes shut tight, made her wish, and blew out every single candle in one breath. The small crowd of 6-year-olds erupted in cheers, and Emma grinned with the satisfaction of a job well done. "What did you wish for?" asked little Sophia from Emma's class. Emma glanced at Benjamin and me with those mischievous green eyes. "I can't tell you, or it won't come true, but I think it's going to happen anyway." Later, after the last parent had picked up their sugar-high child and we'd finished cleaning up the remnants of the party, Emma found me in the kitchen putting away leftover cake. "Mama, can I tell you my wish now that the party's over?" "Of course." "Baby." She climbed onto my lap, still wearing her princess dress, but now with frosting smudged on the skirt and grass stains on the hem, evidence of a perfectly wonderful childhood afternoon. "I wished for a little brother or sister to play with," she announced matter-of-factly. "Someone I can teach things to and protect, like how you protect me." My heart did that fluttering thing. It had been doing a lot lately. Benjamin and I had been talking about expanding our family, but we hadn't mentioned it to Emma yet. Leave it to a 6-year-old to cut straight to the heart of what she wanted. "That's a pretty big wish," I said carefully. "What makes you think it might come true?" "Because you and Daddy Ben have been smiling at each other differently lately, like you have a secret that makes you happy." She studied my face with that uncanny ability kids have to see everything. "Do you have a secret, Mama?" Before I could answer, Benjamin appeared in the doorway, still wearing the ridiculous party hat Emma had insisted he keep on all afternoon. "Are you two plotting something in here?" he asked, grinning. "Emma just told me about her birthday wish," I said, giving him a meaningful look. His eyes lit up with understanding. We'd found out just yesterday, had planned to tell Emma after her birthday excitement died down, but maybe there was no perfect time for news like this. "Emma," Benjamin said, sitting down across from us, "what would you say if I told you that your wish might already be coming true?" Her eyes went wide. "Really, really, really?" I took her small hands in mine. "Really, really? You're going to be a big sister, sweetheart. Mama has a baby growing in her tummy." The squeal of delight that came out of Emma could probably be heard 3 states away. She launched herself into Benjamin's arms, then back to me, then started dancing around the kitchen like she'd been given the best present in the universe. When will the baby come? Can I help pick out names? Will it be a boy or a girl? Can I teach it to read? Will it like unicorns too? "Slow down there, big sister." Benjamin laughed, one question at a time, as I watched my husband, my real husband now. We'd gotten married 6 months ago in a small ceremony in our backyard. Field Emma's rapid-fire questions about her future sibling. I couldn't help but think about those coins that had started it all. 85 cents. That's what I'd given to a stranger on a bus one desperate afternoon, never knowing that those coins would set in motion a chain of events that would bring me everything I'd ever dreamed of. Benjamin and I had talked many times about the strange twists of fate that had brought us together. The tragedy of that night in Las Vegas that had created Emma, the manipulation by Robert that had reunited us, the kindness of a broke single mom that had saved a desperate businessman. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't helped me that day?" Benjamin had asked me just last week as we lay in bed, his hand resting on my still flat stomach. "Every day," I'd admitted. "But then I think about how Emma needed her real father, and I needed someone who would love us both exactly as we are. And somehow the universe figured out how to make that happen, even through Robert's manipulation. Especially through Robert's manipulation. He thought he was orchestrating our destruction, but really, he was just helping fate along, I guess. It had taken months of therapy for Emma to process what had happened on that rooftop. She still had nightmares sometimes, but they were getting fewer and farther between. Dr. Sanders, her therapist, said Emma was remarkably resilient, that being loved unconditionally had given her the foundation to weather even the trauma of that night. As for Robert, his death had been ruled accidental. The investigation had revealed the extent of his manipulation and fraud over the years, validating everything Benjamin had suspected about his former business partner. There was a part of me that grieved for the man Robert had been, before desperation and jealousy had twisted him into someone unrecognizable. But mostly, I felt relief that Emma would never have to wonder if he might return to disrupt our lives again. "Mama." Emma's voice brought me back to the present. She was looking at me with concern. "You went away in your head. Are you okay?" I'm perfect, sweetheart. Just thinking about how lucky we are. Lucky because of the baby. Lucky because we're a family. Lucky because we found each other. Lucky because sometimes when you give away your last coins to help a stranger, the universe gives you back everything you never knew you wanted. Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all life's big concepts. So being kind is like magic. The very best kind of magic, Benjamin said, pulling both of us into his arms. The kind that changes everything that evening. After Emma was finally asleep, still clutching the new stuffed unicorn she'd gotten for her birthday, Benjamin and I sat on our back porch, watching the stars come out over Michigan. No regrets? He asked quietly, his fingers intertwined with mine. About what? Any of it. The fake marriage that became real. The complicated way we found each other. The fact that our love story involves manipulation and tragedy, and rooftop confrontations. I leaned against his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, mixed with birthday cake frosting and Emma's strawberry shampoo. You know what I learned from all of this, I said. Love isn't about perfect circumstances or fairy tale beginnings. It's about choosing each other every day, even when the story gets complicated, especially when the story gets complicated. So no regrets. None, well, except maybe one. Benjamin tensed. What's that? I regret that it took me so long to realize that home isn't a place. It's the people who choose to stay with you, no matter what. He relaxed and pressed a kiss to the top of my head. In that case, Mrs. Montgomery, welcome home. As I sat there in the arms of the man I loved, knowing our daughter was safe in her bed, and our second child was growing healthy and strong, I thought about those coins one more time. Such a small gesture, giving up my last money to help a stranger. But kindness, I'd learned, has a way of multiplying. You give a little, and the universe gives back everything. Sometimes the most ordinary moments lead to the most extraordinary lives. And sometimes, when you think you have nothing left to give, that's exactly when you have everything someone else needs. Those coins changed everything. But really, it was the love that grew from that moment of kindness that transformed 3 broken people into one unbreakable family.